Well, once again, we welcome you to Heartland. If you're visiting with us, we're so glad you've come. My name is Joel. I'm one of the pastors here at Heartland. We're so glad you're here. We are in a teaching series entitled Practicing Jesus. And the reason why we've entitled it that way is because Jesus didn't just come and teach, but he came and he was our example. He is our example of how to live our lives here on earth. And so we want to live and walk as Jesus lived and walked. And this morning, the topic is practicing servanthood. Now, it's one of those topics that I've got to alert you, warn you, it might offend you. It might convict you. It might bother you. And not what I say, but the words of Jesus. Hopefully not what I say would offend you. But the words of Jesus might provoke you, might cause you to look in the mirror and say, whoa, Jesus is calling me to do what? And so I trust that you will receive the word of the Lord today, and may it minister to you in a life-transformative way. You see, when you do life God's way, oh, friend, it is the way to discover yourself. It is the way to live a life that is fulfilling. It is a way to live a life that is glorifying to God. And so we talk about servanthood. And the reason why it's provocative in a sense in terms of its teaching is because our culture is so much different than this. Let's face it, our society is so self-absorbed. Everything many times is circled around us, that life is all about me rather than about others. I mean, one of the indications that this is true is the way marketers market their products and services that you and I buy and use. They feed this mentality that life is all about me. In many ways, it's this mentality that says, I am the main actor in life and everybody else is supporting actors. Everybody else's job is to make sure that I stay in the spotlight, center stage. And yet, Jesus says it's when you give your life away that you find it. Jesus is the one who says, the last shall be first. And so marketers use this environment of it's all about me all the time. Let's look at some of these marketing strategies, shall we? Visa. Their slogan is, it's everywhere you want to be. Wherever you want to be, guess what? Visa is right there for you. To give you all that you need, right? It's there for you. Visa was invented just for you. How about this one? 2 for me, none for you. This is my favorite Twix, right? So this is for me and you get nothing, right? A world that's all about taking rather than giving. Give yourself a treat and don't share it. Buy a Twix. Here's another one. Ford. Everything we do is driven by you. Did you know that? Everything that Ford has created is driven by you. It's too bad you don't get some of those profits. You're just spending. How about this one? Audi, never follow. Never follow. You drive an Audi, you are leader of the pack. Everybody else follows you. So, hey, you got to buy our car because you will be the leader of the pack. How about this one? Bank of America, think what we can do for you. It's all about you. The whole banking system is all about you. Are you getting the point here? I'm just giving you a handful of examples of how our culture is self-absorbed, that everything is pointing that I am the main key actor. Everybody else are supporting actors, and their job is to serve me to ensure that I stay in the spotlight. Friends, that mentality leaks into our workplaces. It leaks into our marriages. It leaks into our families. It leaks into our churches, where many times we come to church and it's, I am the consumer, you're the professional. And if you don't meet what I want, guess what? We're out of here. You see, consumers, self-absorbed culture. But yet we need to take that environment that we live in and bring it to the word of the Lord and say, God, what do you have to say about this? And so here's what he has to say. Turn to your Bibles in Luke chapter 17, 5 to 10. And then we're going to jump over to Luke chapter 12 as well, verses 35 to 40. Warning. I'm just warning you. This may offend you. Okay, so here we go. Jesus says this. The apostles said to the Lord, increase our faith. That's a great request for these disciples, the apostles. Jesus, can you increase our faith? And this is how Jesus responded. He said, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mulberry tree, be uprooted and planted in the sea, and it will obey you. Now hold that screen. I want to stop there. This verse is the context of this passage this morning. The disciples are asking for a good thing, don't you agree? Give us more faith because we want to be used by you, Jesus. And Jesus says, you know what? I'm going to give you faith. I'm going to give you faith that is powerful, so much so that you can speak to mulberry trees and get them uprooted and planted in the sea. He's making a point. Faith and power is going to be amazing in your life. But you know what? There's some danger when we get faith and power. The danger is this, that all of a sudden when God begins to respond to your faith, when God begins to use you and God uses you to do great things, there will be this moment where you forget why he gave it to you. Where all of a sudden that faith and power can become more about you than what it was given to you for. You see, an environment of servanthood is critical to the faith and power that God gives you. Because if God gives you faith and power and then all of a sudden you use it for your own fame, your own reputation, you've lost the whole point. Which is why Jesus then begins to talk about servanthood right after this. And so we continue. Suppose one of you has a servant plowing or looking after the sheep. Will he say to the servant when he comes in from the field, come along now, you've worked all day, sit down and eat? Won't he rather say, prepare my supper first, get yourself ready and wait on me while I eat and drink? After that, you may eat and drink. Will he thank the servant because he did what he was told to do? Great question. In many ways, Jesus says it's a rhetorical question. The answer is no, because the servant is only fulfilling his duty. He's doing what he's supposed to do. Goes on to say, so you also, when you have done everything you were told to do, should say, we are unworthy servants. We have only done our duty. Whoa. No, the disciples, the apostles, I'm sure, didn't expect Jesus to pull out the servant talk. They were just asking for faith and power. Now, all of a sudden, they're talking about your servants. I've given you a job. It's not about you, disciples. It's about doing what the master says. Okay, now let's flip over to Luke chapter 12, 35 to 40. Jesus, in many places in his teaching, talks about servanthood. This is another one. He says to us this morning, Jesus, be dressed ready for service and keep your lamps burning, like servants waiting for their master to return from a wedding banquet, so that when he comes and he knocks, they can immediately open the door for him. It will be good for those servants whose master finds them watching when he comes. Truly, I tell you, he will dress himself to serve, will have them recline at the table, and will come and wait on them. It will be good for those servants whose master finds them ready, even if he comes in the middle of the night or toward daybreak. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also, so here's the application, you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Jesus is saying, you don't know when I'm coming. I'm your master, you're my servants. Your job is to be dressed and ready to serve. I don't know about you, but both of those passages kind of go against the grain of culture. All of a sudden, 2 for me, none for you doesn't make sense. All of a sudden, Jesus is starting a revolution, a service revolution. Jesus is making clear to the disciples and to us this morning that his kingdom works a whole lot different than human kingdoms. His kingdom is about a band of servants who are ready, dressed to serve the master. The kingdom of God is about a people who understand that it's not about them. It's not about them being the lead actor. It's about Jesus being the reason why we live. How do you feel about that? How does that affect your everyday life? How does it affect what your life is all about? I think there's a couple of pieces that I want to highlight, right? That comes from the text principles. The first one is this: the master's needs are more important than the servant's needs. In the text, the illustration that Jesus is making, there is no doubt that he's teaching them that the master's needs are more important than the servant's needs. Remember the story, the first one in Luke 17, or 12, I should say. That the master, the servant is working all day, comes home. He's not expected to now rest and prepare his own dinner. He's expected to serve the master first and then take care of himself. And he does it because that's what he's called to do. He doesn't do it because the master's thanking him profusely. He's doing it because he knows that's who he is. That's what his calling is to be a servant of the master. Whereas the culture says, no. I don't do no serving others. They serve me. This is about me. And we walk into our marriages and say, this is about me getting happiness out of this relationship, not me giving it. We go into our places of work and we say, this is about me, not about helping my company, helping the people around me reach their potential. This is about me making it to the top. It creeps into the lives of pastors when it becomes more about a personality rather than, and leaders that make decisions based on their own preferences rather than what's best for the community. And Jesus steps in and says, wait a minute, I'm your master, you're my servants. I'm here for him. He's not here just for me. I'm the one who's got the lamps burning, ready, dressed for service, because my life is about him. In fact, I believe that when Jesus saves us, yes, he saves us and he's our Savior. He's our forgiver. He's our Messiah. He gives us life. The old has gone. The new has come. But he also wants to be our Lord. He wants to be the reason why we live now. He wants us, in light of his mercy and grace that he's bestowed in our life, he wants us to have an attitude of, Lord, how can I withhold anything from you? You gave me life. Assuredly, I'll give you my talents. Assuredly, I'll give you my time. Assuredly, I'll give you my treasure. Because in view of your mercy, how can I withhold anything from you? I'm your servant. You're my master. Whatever you say, I'm ready. I'm ready to say yes to you at any moment. At any moment. The master's needs are more important than the servant's needs. In many ways, Jesus saves us from ourselves. A life that is so concentrated about ourselves. A life, Jesus says, it's when you give your life away that you find it. It's when you give it away that you find it. Don't get caught up with the world that says, no, it's when you hoard it. It's when it becomes all about you. It's when you lose your life is when you do that. It's when you give it away that you find it. J. Oswald made a statement. He said, the true spiritual leader seeks to put more into life than he hopes to take out of it. What are you putting into life, friend? Sometimes we're in this mode of, what can I get out of it? What can you put into it? The more you put into it, the more you invest in others, the more you invest in the kingdom, the more, friend, your life will be filled with purpose. With purpose. The second principle that I find in these texts is that our obedience is more important than our rights. Our obedience is more important than our rights. Whew. We live in a right society, right? Rights society, where it's all about us. It's all about advocating. And I'm not saying that that's all bad, but that can be bad. It could be a self-absorbed culture. And Jesus here says our obedience is more important than our rights. Notice, he says, should the master say thank you? Does he say thank you? No, because that's part of his duty or her duty. The text is pointing us to a crucified life. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not. But God's calling us to a crucified life. And he's called me to a crucified life. What did Paul write in Galatians 2:20? I have been crucified with Christ. And I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up for me. So when we say yes to Jesus, we're saying, Lord, my life now, from having the reins myself, I give you the reins. From being behind the driver's seat, I'm giving you the driver's seat. You might say, boy, I'd be losing myself if I did that. No, you will actually find yourself because he was your creator. He knows your purpose and plan. It's when you let him drive you that you come fully alive. But the world says, what? You're not meant to be driving in the driver's seat. You got to be the leader. No, let Jesus be your leader. Let him come into your life and let him live his life through you, and you will reach your destiny. You will reach what God created you to do. You will come fully alive. You won't lose yourself. You'll find yourself. You'll find yourself. Our rights, our egos, our reputation, our self-dependency are crucified with Christ. So, disciples, you're asking a great question. Can we have more faith, more power? Yeah, I'm going to give you a lot of faith and power. But remember, it's in an environment of service. The reason why I give you faith and power is because I've called you to be my servants. I've called you to be my workers, to advance my kingdom on earth. So here's some thoughts, friends. Jesus and the service revolution. Jesus and the service revolution. Jesus came to bring a revolution of service. The practice of service is critical to the life of the disciple. The desire to extend humble service to others happens when our eyes and our hearts are fixed on Jesus. You see, no vision, no banners can cause us to want to serve more. No. Jesus and getting a glimpse of Jesus will compel us to live a life of service. No bright mission statement or any of that will ever do that. But when we fix our eyes on Jesus and get a vision and a glimpse of who Jesus was, it will assuredly compel us to live a life of service. You see, Jesus exemplified a service revolution. How so? Jesus in the manger. You see, Jesus could have chosen to come to the earth in whatever way he wanted. He was God. He's creator of the universe. He could have come with chariots and he could have come with blazing fire, but he comes as a baby. What does that tell you? He comes as a baby dependent on a teenage mother. And further, he's born in a small town that's not really popular on the map, and he's allowed himself to be laid in a manger in very humble surroundings. This is our Jesus. This is the King of the universe. He comes as a baby, and his life on earth begins in a stable, in a manger. Further from that, he begins his ministry, and his ministry is of humble service unto others. As he walks the roads of this dusty world, he's looking to meet people's needs. There are times where people who are outcasts of society, he goes after the leper, the one who has been cast to the fringe of the culture, of the society, and he goes to him and he touches him. And he serves the man. He comes and he serves the needs of those that have come and said, listen, my son is so ravaged by demons. Can you come help? And he comes and he liberates and he frees by serving them. Others are brought to him who are caught in all kinds of sin and bondage, and Jesus kneels down and he serves them and he grants them forgiveness and grace and mercy. There are times where the masses are without any food and they don't know where to get their physical sustenance, and Jesus says, give me what you got, and he multiplies it and thousands eat, and he serves them a meal. Over and over again, if you read through the gospel, Jesus serves the needs of the people. And then it leads him to the cross. The ultimate picture of servanthood. In fact, Jesus is called the suffering servant by the prophet Isaiah. He comes as a lamb that is journeying to his slaughter. He goes from the cradle to the cross, the most humiliating death, to die on a cross that was reserved for the worst of worst criminals. And there he is, the creator of the universe, humbly, quietly going down the Via Dolorosa to get up Golgotha, Skull Hill, to be nailed and mocked and ridiculed by soldiers and the ones he created. And right to the last moments of his life, he's hearing the heckling of a thief. He's hearing the mockery of the soldiers. You say you're the Son of God. Come on, save yourself. He comes as a suffering servant. He started with a cradle. It was from there where, as he grew older, he ministered to the needs of those around him and he served. The scriptures tell us that he did not come to be served, but to serve, all the way to the point of allowing himself to be nailed to a cross. Are you fixing your eyes on Jesus and who he was? That's who our master is. He came as a servant. And you know what? Not only did he serve us, and we have the accounts of how he did that in the gospel, but I believe he continues to serve us. And that's a humbling thought. How does he continue to serve you? I think he continues to serve us in a variety of ways. There's a whole host of ways. He protects us. God is involved in your life. He protects you from emotional harm, physical harm. Just a few weeks ago, I was driving down Whittle Road here, and I was about to turn left on Britannia, and the light was green, and it was my right to go. And I was about to go, and then something told me, put on the brakes, don't go. Put on the brakes. As I stopped at the line, which was green, the light was green, car came right through the red light. He would have completely plowed right into me. That was Jesus. That was Jesus who protected me that day. I think that we don't even see half of the things that he protects us from. Not just physical, but emotional, pain. And he serves us. That day, Jesus is like, stop, Joel. And he served me. He served me. He grants us power for everyday circumstances. Situations at work that seem so complex, Jesus is there ready to serve you, give you the strength to endure. Have you ever gone through some difficulty, maybe tragedy, death, and discouragement, and now you look back and think, man, I don't know how I got through that. Jesus helped you get through that. He gave you the strength to endure. He served you all the way through those dark nights of the soul when you wept and you wept till you had no more tears. It was Jesus who kept you alive. It was Jesus. Scriptures say he intercedes for us. At the right hand of the Father, intercede. He's praying for you. He serves us by praying for us. Jesus, the creator of the universe. Are you seeing why it's so important we fix our eyes on Jesus? If we want to get a part of the revolution of service, you got to start with Jesus. You got to get a glimpse of who he is. And boy, when you stare at Jesus and when you study his life and when you start to reflect of how good he's been to you, you start to realize, oh, God, how can I make my life about me? Because if it wasn't for you, I'd be done. So God, take my life and let it be. Take my hands, take my feet, take my time, even if it's inconvenient. God, I'm your servant. I've got the lamp on. I'm dressed for service. It's not about me, it's you. I'm ready to be your servant. You know, Jesus, our God, he doesn't owe us anything. He saved you. He saved you. That's why Romans 12:1 says, in view of God's mercy now, I offer my life to you. May it be a holy and living sacrifice, pleasing to you. And so, get a glimpse of Jesus. Fix your eyes on Jesus, and you'll find the suffering servant. You find the one who showed us how to live. Some thoughts related to this servant. We need to check our hearts. In light of what we just learned through the text here, we need to always have a servant's heart check. You see, because we can begin to serve for the wrong motives. You know, I wish I could say that all of us serve with the right attitude and right heart at all times. But if we're honest here today, there are times where we serve for the wrong motives. It would be nice to think that everyone who serves does so with healthy motives, but such is not always the case. That's why we all need to examine ourselves. Why am I serving? Why do I do what I do for the Lord? What is the reason? Why does Joel pastor a congregation? Why does Joel want this church to be strong and vibrant and growing? Why does Joel and the leadership team want this church to continue to have great influence and one day build the house of the Lord on Canadian Place? Why? So that when, as a pastor, I go to pastor's conference, we talk about, hey, how big is your church? Oh, my church is this big. Wow, you must be an amazing pastor. Yeah, well, you know, I try my best. God knows my motive. He knows what's in my heart. And I could serve with the wrong motives. And so can you. In fact, let's bring to the surface some potential wrong motives for serving. The first one is an effort to gain God's favor and love. If we're serving with hopes that we would gain more of God's favor and love, we're doing it for the wrong motives. You know, sometimes we serve the Lord, or we give our resources to the work of the Lord, or we give of our time and talents, and we're thinking we're doing math. We're going, okay, this is what I expect now, God. Because I'm doing this, you better do this, this, and this for me. Well, you know, I better get favor from you now because I did that. Or we think, you know, God, you better love me more than that person because I'm doing this. When we serve with that motive, we're doing it for the wrong reason. The reality is God already loves you. If you get into this realm, I mean, how much can you do to earn God's love? You'll never, right? Doesn't work. Doesn't work. Jesus, when he was baptized, the Father said to him, "You are my Son, I love you. With you I am well pleased." He hadn't even started his ministry yet. But he wanted him to know that all that he was going to do wasn't going to make his Father love him more. He was already loved. He was already highly favored. It was in that understanding and identity that now Jesus could serve without worrying about performing. And the same is for you and for me. God has already validated you. You don't have to earn your way to some sort of love percentage. He already fully loves you. The second wrong motive is human applause. Come on, you got to check your heart. Why do you do what you do? Is it because you want others to think of you as very highly spiritual? Is it so that people come to you so that they're dependent on you? I'm needed. That's society's mindset. I'm still the lead actor and you guys need me. That's the wrong motive for human applause. We want it. That's why Jesus many times says, when you give, don't let your right hand know what your left hand doing. Do it in secret. Kill that thing in you that wants to make it about you. It's not about you. When you pray, shut the door. Get in your prayer closet. Why? Because there'll be this tendency to be like the Pharisees who profess their long-winded prayers with big words so that others would think they're amazing and need them. No. We don't serve for human applause. We serve for the one day divine nod of approval. The Lord knows what you do. The Lord sees your heart. He sees your commitment. He sees the time you put in. He sees your investment. He sees your heart. Don't settle for human applause. Desire heavenly applause, the divine nod of approval. Another potential wrong motive for serving is to bolster a sense of positive self-esteem. Sometimes we just want to feel good. And that's okay, but if all the reason why you serve is so that you feel good about yourself, you're setting yourself for disappointment. You know why? Because sometimes when you enter the realm of the service revolution, not everybody will appreciate your service. In fact, some might even begin to treat you like a servant. What happens then? If you're doing it simply to boost your self-esteem, you're going to stop doing it if they're not appreciated. If you're not affirmed, I'm not saying we shouldn't appreciate and affirm each other, but if the reason why we serve is for our own positive self-esteem, friend, there will be moments in your service where you'll feel unappreciated, taken for granted, and even treated as a servant. But the true servant serves even when they're treated like one, because they're serving not just man, they're serving the Lord. Do it unto the Lord. And that's what real servants look like, that even when they're treated like one, they serve, because they're not serving just to build their self-esteem. They're serving because they've encountered a living God. And so when they serve, they're serving Him. All right. Here's another wrong motive to look out for: to appease a sense of shame and guilt. To appease a sense of shame and guilt. We need to watch for this, friends. See, we're all susceptible to falling, to sinning, missteps, wrong attitude, wrong mindset, wrong action. On this side of heaven, we're going to have those moments where we sin. And it's in those moments, friend, there'll be this temptation to want to, I've got to make up for that. I've got to kind of balance the ledger, to use an accounting illustration. I've got to balance the justice scale. So this is what we do. We fall flat on our face, and the first thing we do is we pick up the phone and say, is there anything I could do at the church? I'll give more. I'll do more. We're trying to control the spiritual ledger of our life. And sometimes we serve out of guilt and shame. Jesus says, no. When you have guilt, when you are struggling with sin, you come to me and say, Jesus, I need your grace today. I don't try to make my religion some man-made religion and go to the church and put some extra money in the thing and do some extra prayers and do. No, I'm bankrupt, Jesus, and I come to you because I need your grace. I don't try to earn it. It's by grace that we are saved. And naturally, all that service comes out of an attitude of being one who has experienced grace and love. That's why we give it all to Him. But we don't try to earn our way. And sometimes when there is shame and guilt because of some of the wrong decisions we've made, that might be the thing that's compelling us to serve, and that's a wrong motive to serve. Jesus desires us to come to a place where we are motivated to serve because we've experienced His love, and we desire to share it with others. That's the purest sense. The motivating factor to be a servant and to serve others is because, man, I've experienced His love in such an amazing way. His grace, His mercy, so much so that That God, my lamp is burning. I'm dressed. My life is yours now. Whatever you do, whatever you call, whenever you call, even if it's in the middle of the night and you've put some burden in my heart to pray for somebody, I'm going to get out of my bed and I'm going to pray because you're calling me to serve. You know that sometimes it's going to be inconvenient to serve? A friend of mine who I went to college with, is in overseas missions work, and him and his family, they've got 3 kids, and they're out there, not in a safe country, but they're called. Their life is not their own. And they're out there on the front lines, and he had caught a terrible disease in this country that he was serving, and he was dying. And he was on his deathbed, and he's thinking to himself, God, but I've done what you've called me to do. Like, I didn't come here but to experience this, and yet there he was. He's on his deathbed, and the disease had taken hold of his body. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, one of his friends, an elderly lady who committed to praying for him, is resting in the middle of the night, and God wakes her up and says, you got to pray for Jonathan. Jonathan, why? So she obeyed because the master called. And so she got up out of her bed, and she got on her knees, and she went into the kitchen, and she had his picture on her fridge, and she began to just pray for Jonathan, not even really knowing why. But it was in that very moment that Jonathan was dying of this body that got stricken by this disease. And it was in that very moment that he began to get well. And he was fully restored. He was healed. Now, the reason why we know this is because there was conversations that then ensued after this encounter he had with God. And he began to share it with his partners, and the elderly lady says, makes sense now. I was sleeping, and God asked me to pray for you. And look what he did. You see, when we've experienced the love of God, we're ready. Whatever you want, Lord, at any time, use me. You don't need to be a pastor. You don't need a master's degree in theology to do the work of God. You are a child of God, and God has called you to do great work in expanding his kingdom. When he calls, is your lamp burning, and are you dressed? Are you ready to serve him? Because he's your master, and we're his servants. I conclude with this thought: rendering service or becoming a servant. I believe there is a huge difference between rendering service and becoming a servant. I think we live in a culture of rendering service. We render service to each other. What does that mean? Rendering service is generally about short-term commitments done when it's convenient. If it's convenient, I'm there, God. If it's too demanding, well, I may not be there. Rendering service, we just render service if it's too demanding, or if it doesn't cramp our style, or maybe if we like the people we're working with, then maybe we'll render you some service. We look at our calendars and say, church life, let's see, where can I pick and choose when to serve Jesus? We're rendering service rather than understanding that we are servants. There's a big difference. Servants are there to obey when the master calls, whether it's convenient or not, because it's all about him. He's not one of the supporting actors. He's the main role, and I'm there to serve him. He's not there just to serve me. And so rendering service is there. Becoming a servant gets to the very core of our heart and identity. It's not so much about a project or activity, but a disposition of our soul. When we become a servant, all our actions flow out of this identity. We don't just render service. Hear me. We don't just want to be a church that renders some service. We want to be a church that is filled with servants. That even when it infringes on our schedules and on our wallets and on our time, God, my lamp is burning, I'm dressed, I'm ready, I'm yours. I'm yours. Jesus became a servant rather than simply just offering acts of service. I conclude with this passage, Philippians 2, Ray, the team can come on up. We'll land this plane right now. But Philippians 2, fix your eyes on Jesus here, friends. It says, in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset of Christ Jesus. This was his mindset. Who being in very nature God did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant. He didn't just render service. He became, in very nature, a servant. Being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on the cross. Are we getting this, friends? Fix your eyes on Jesus, and when you fix your eyes on Jesus, you find a suffering servant who came to give you life. In being very nature God, he made himself in very nature a servant. He didn't just render some service. He doesn't just render service. He is servant. And so as Christ followers, our practice of servanthood is not to just render service. We are servants to the Master. And finally, in John 13, he leaves us, before he goes to the cross, he leaves us this vivid picture of the servant. He looks at his disciples and he says, I'm going to wash your feet. What are you talking about, washing your feet? Jesus, you're God. I mean, Peter speaks up and says, I'm not letting you wash my feet. And Jesus says, whoa, if you don't let me wash your feet, Peter, you have no part of me. Why did Jesus say that to Peter? Because in Peter's mind, he thought to himself that leaders are served, they don't serve. And Jesus wanted him to know that his kingdom was very different. Peter, I am commissioning you to be a servant. And Jesus gets down on his feet with his towel around his waist, and he washes those disciples' feet, including Judas, his betrayer. And then at the end of washing all of their feet, he looks at them and he says, now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. You want to be blessed in your life? Serve. Be a servant. The posture of a Christ follower, sometimes I wonder if our posture in our culture for Christ followers isn't like this. Feed me. God, I need this. I need that. Church life. I'm going to find myself a nice comfy seat here. Hope nobody asks me to do anything around here. We recline. We become consumers. 2 for me, none for you. Instead, Jesus draws a picture for the disciples that day. You want faith and power? I'll give it to you. But it's in an environment of burning lamps, dressed for service, ready to go. Where's the need? Ray, where's the need? We need more musicians, singers. We got Christmas. Where can I serve? I got some talent. I'm not just going to render you service. I am a servant. I'm a servant, Lord. My life is yours. Would you stand with me?